This is Bob McIlvaine conducting an interview today with Lloyd Armbrust, who's the CEO of Armbrust American, and a very interesting company. And before we get into the interview, though, Lloyd, I'd like to have you give us a little bit of your background, if you would, and how you got into all this.
Yeah, Bob. Well, first, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate you guys reaching out. I have a pretty interesting background, I think, from manufacturing anyways. I grew up in a manufacturing family. My dad, every day was working at running basically a lime plant and where they processed lime. And so I grew up kind of, the Duluth, Superior area up north, kind of watching him deal with all of these crazy issues, working with these big machines. And, as a kid, that's just like, it just kind of captivates you, kind of grabs you. And I spent as much time as I could at his processing plant. When I grew up, I wanted to get into manufacturing and production, that sort of thing. But just to kind of put it in perspective, during World War II, Duluth, Minnesota had a population of almost 250,000 people. But by the time I left Duluth, when I was 18 years old and went to college, it had a population of about 70,000. And that was all like manufacturing, production, processing, all gone from the region. And, so I did kind of what I guess people my age do, which is I got into technology startups. And so I built a technology company. We got into a technology incubator called Y Combinator in 2010. And then we grew that to about $11 million in revenue. Late last year, I bought out my investors and still have that company. But when the coronavirus hit, it kind of brought me back to my roots, really thinking about like manufacturing, because when I looked into the tech world, the tech startup giants like Sam Altman, as an example, he wanted to help solve this problem of the United States not having enough surgical masks. And so he put together a foundation, I think it's called 1 billion masks, where they were going to buy 1 billion masks in bulk from China. And I'm just sitting here thinking, like, why buy it one time from China when we could stand up the manufacturing here and actually have that, resource forever, and not just for this crisis, but for the next crisis. And so, as I was looking into this stuff and gathering experts in robotics and automation, mechanical engineers, I'm used to dealing with software engineers, but it's actually very, very similar. And we put together a whole team in a factory very, very quickly. We have I think 7 automated lines running right now, and close to about 500,000 in production once those get fully online a day, 500,000 per day.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Are we looking at one of these lines right here now? There's a picture in front of us here. I'll pull this up.
Yes. Yeah, that's one of the lines. So basically the way and this is for a surgical mask. What this is doing is taking the 3 layers of polypropylene. So the outer layers and the inner layer is spunbond polypropylene, and then the middle layer is meltblown polypropylene, all virgin. It's welding them together using a sonic welder, and that's what you're looking at right there. And then what happens is that splits into a function where it's going to add the ear loops on the mask, also using sonic welding. So that kind of splits it up, because the first part goes about 120 masks per minute. And to kind of keep at that rate, we have 2 welding machines that put the ear loops on.
Yeah, so I think I put down here somewhere, some of these calculations that so it's 120 masks per minute on each one of these lines. Is that correct then?
Yes, but that's at full speed. And to be honest, right now, I think the top machines that we have are running at about 90 per minute right now. So it takes about 6 months to kind of get those lines to be fully set in before you can turn them all the way up. It's actually literally gravity settling the machine so that it can go at that top speed. So, the reason why I say we're only, getting to about 500,000 a day in production is because, we just set up a new line last week, and another line the week before. And when they first start out, they're running at about 5% capacity, and then they kind of like every week you add about 5% capacity to them because you have to kind of get all the kinks out.
So you've got outer and inner layers of spunbond and the meltblown in between. Are you having any trouble getting the media?
So we actually are producing the meltblown here.
You are. That's
So
interesting.
yeah, so the idea is that this is going to be a vertically integrated factory where we can get raw polypropylene pellets, from Houston or Mexico, and process them, and then basically turn them into the spunbond and the meltblown, and then come out the back end with masks on pallets. I think we shipped out 1.2 million masks today on pallets, so alone. So that just kind of shows you the scale of things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so that's a technical challenge beyond the typical mask making to get into the meltblown media production as well. Has that been a challenge for you, or has that been something that was as easily mastered as the making of the masks themselves?
I mean, different problems, to be honest. The big problem was trying to get the BFE correct,
Right.
filtration, just because, and we don't have it fully, because this is a new machine that we just set up, and we don't have that fully solved. So we do have some, a lot of probably about half the material that we're using right now is purchased material from the United States. And the idea is that we will transition fully into ours, but we just started our machine. So, right now it's probably at a BFE of about 95, 96 bacterial filtration. Our surgical masks, which we just got our surgical mask rating from the FDA this week, they have to be at a 98 or better, and they're actually at 99.2 on average. So we've really got to keep that up. So before we start utilizing our material fully in our masks, we really have to get that up. But that's just an adjustment, so it just takes some time.
And the challenge of getting the meltblowns right is something that a lot of the Chinese suppliers were not able to do, were they? And so you had a huge number. I think it's in one city alone in China, there were 500 or 600 startups trying to make meltblown media and selling it all over the place. And
Yeah.
and the result was very defective masks and
Yep.
and I think you alluded to some of those problems on your website.
Yeah, I think the key is that China obviously is light years ahead of the United States when it comes to some of this automation and technology that they have. I mean, their infrastructure is just so much better. You can, if you need 1,000 conveyor belts in China, there's a company you can call and they'll be there the next day. I mean, it just doesn't exist in the United States. There's just sensors and things that take weeks to get here that you can go down to a 24-hour market in China and get. So I think we're missing a lot of the infrastructure. But the thing that we have in the United States that I don't think they have in China is that focus on standards. We really do focus on those standards. And so if you're buying from a meltblown manufacturer here in the United States, you can trust that it's going to be, a lot better quality versus in China. If you're going to be buying meltblown from somebody, they better have been making that meltblown for 10, 20 years. And they better not be some overnight organization that is just setting this up. Otherwise, you're really rolling the dice. And it's just not a good idea to roll the dice when you're talking about medically protected gear.
Right. Yeah. And we worked with New York Times that wrote a full-page article on the Chinese production, and we've been following the Sinopec meltblown production over there. And then we did this interview with one of the managing directors of Rycofil a few days ago, And he indicated that, even though Sinopec is probably one of the largest companies in the world, and has put in all this meltblown capacity, that they've had their problems and are actually coming to Rycofill to try to help them. So it's kind of interesting that this is a more complex situation, even when it comes to some, the one of the largest companies in the world trying to solve it.
Well, something that the Chinese did that's very interesting is they were able to make the melt blown a lot thinner by adding this second stage electrostatic process and this electric material to the polypropylene, at about 2.5%. And that's what's really allowed you to have like a 25 GSM, a really thin, a lot thinner fabric, but you're still getting that 98, 99 BFE. What we do is we're testing all of the melt. We test every batch. So if we get a ton of melt blown from somebody else, basically every pallet will pull a roll off and we'll test the BFE using our own in-house tests. And then we'll do the same thing. We do the same thing obviously with our stuff as well. And so when we go to market with our stuff, the plan is that, and we're not there yet, but again, my professional background's been in software. My idea is that you'll be able to pick up a box and scan a QR code on the back of our box, and you'll be able to see when that mask was made, who made it, and what the BFE of that particular batch was on that day. That's the kind of level of transparency that, like, honestly, just doesn't exist. Not even at like some of the best folks in the world doing this, like 3M.
Right.
They just don't have that sort of like integrated technology. But we're building our software suite from the ground up.
Well, that's certainly very, very impressive.
Well, it's not done yet, so don't give me credit yet.
the thing I wanted to move on to then is that you actually have the ability to remove these small viruses, and we're doing a lot of analysis in our daily alerts here. And first of all, we've ascertained that much of the virus is transmitted as small aerosols.
Mm-hmm.
And so unless you have this electrostatic effect that you're creating or have a very fine nanofiber membrane, you're not going to be able to pick up these virus particles. And the common thinking has been, well, at least with a cloth mask, you're capturing the cough droplets and the sneezes.
Yeah.
But a lot of the other studies that we show that indicate that any kind of a large droplet will evaporate and generate aerosols, and there's nothing that's more efficient as an aerosol generator than having some sort of a mesh or cloth and a droplet on it and the air passing through it. So all of a sudden it's dawning on us, and I think it's dawning on a lot of people, that a cloth mask is essentially an aerosol generator, and it may even be worse, that instead of a cough landing on the ground, some droplet on the ground somewhere, it's being converted to an airborne particle. And so here is something that's in our release that goes out today that
Oh, wow.
that basically says with an N95 mask, the total virus reduction from the total, you're down to 12%. Whereas with a cloth mask, you're actually converting some of the cough droplets into aerosols, and then the airborne transmission goes way up. And so you might have 80% of the total transmission by wearing that cloth mask. So it's completely at odds with a lot of the thinking. And I think we're saying it's like, you need a knife to do surgery, but it doesn't make any difference whether it's a butcher knife or a high quality scalpel. And I think, what this is showing, that only products that actually take out these small viruses, and if you cough into an N95 mask, but you have the protection of that high filtering efficiency, maybe the water vapor will go through, but the viruses won't. So, you're not going to be an aerosol. You're going to be a water vapor generator, but not a virus generator. So I think, this is a whole line of new thinking that
Yeah.
we're pursuing on a daily basis here. And in fact, we were working with India this morning and wanted to bring NIOSH into this to get their
Hmm.
thinking. But I
Well,
think, go ahead.
I'm curious, because an N95 is obviously only, they only have to have a PFE and BFE of 95%, where type 2 ASTM surgical mask is closer to, it's 98 or better. It's actually better material in some cases. And part of that is the breathability, because it's hard to get the breathability, when you have the full face cover and the suction that a NIOSH N95
Uh-huh.
requires. But actually ours have the breathability that would be required. My curiosity here is what your numbers would show on a surgical mask. There was a study in Hong Kong and granted it was with influenza, but they compared two hospitals, one that used N95s and one that used surgical masks for flu season. And then they
Uh-huh.
compared the doctors that got the flu, that were treating flu patients, and there was statistically no difference
Mhm.
between wearing an N95 mask or a surgical mask during that time. And granted, these are doctors, so they're both wearing them correctly, which is, the problem, because I see a lot of people wearing their masks, with like this, with
Right,
the
right.
face covered, and that obviously doesn't work. But I would be curious to see this kind of data presented for a surgical mask, like an ASTM2 surgical mask, because I think it would be the same or better. I would think.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, any of this data, we're gathering as much of this data as we can, and I think we are ahead of some of the researchers, because we are focused on air filtration and
right.
capture of small particles and all these different things. And
Yeah.
but all this tends to come together. There's one South Korean uh, uh, research paper that we cite in the same article, news release today, and they basically found with their low efficiency masks that the virus swabs found almost all the virus on the outside rather than on the inside of the mask. And of course, then the question is how much of the virus just escapes. But if what they can find is on the outside rather than inside, it obviously went through. So, these are just
Exactly.
a lot of the parameters that need to be expressed. Tell us about how you get your electrostatic effect, because you mentioned the thinner media, the thicker media, and so forth.
Yeah. So I mean, there's this. So there's three different types of filtration that, as you know, that a layer of meltblown is doing. But the one we're focusing on is the electrostatic part. That's where it's capturing a lot of the smaller particles or particulates, is just with that electrostatic, those properties. And so you can rely on the natural electrostatic properties by doing like a 50 or 75 GSM thick mask. That will get you to that 98, 99, that BFE 98, 99. If it's just thicker, naturally, the meltblown process will do that. But if you want to supercharge that and make it smaller, what you can do is you can add this mixture, it's a proprietary mixture to it, about 2% polypropylene. And in the extrusion process, when you get the melt flow just right, you blow it onto the cylinder, and then right after that you put it through an electrostatic generator that activates that proprietary mix, and that adds that extra level of BFE, because it's adding that extra. It's basically adding static electricity. Is the kind of the simplified way of saying it. By injecting more static electricity than meltblown, it's thinner meltblown, higher breathability, higher BFE.
Yeah, that's which both of which are attractive, and I think what this graph shows is that the average person is going to need to wear a high efficiency mask, and that means the breathability is going to be important uh, because it's not just the doctors in a hospital. It's going to be people all over the place, and therefore uh, the more breathable, the more likely the person is to be to wearing the mask. And then you've got things like, we were in South Korea, they required N95 masks on all the children, including those that were required to do
Crazy.
a 1,000-meter run for a test as a sophomore or something in high school. Two of the runners died because of they were wearing N95 masks, and they got CO2
No
buildup,
way.
and so forth. So, there is a consideration of the breathability here.
Yeah, that is definitely a big part of it. Yeah, and I don't know what which masks they're using in that process. So that really does better. But I mean, I think if you're doing exercise in one of those, I think it'd be and it's outdoors. You might as well just use one with a valve on it or two valves. I think that
Right,
would be a lot better
right, and
because
that's
you're not going to have that.
yeah, that is a good. In fact, we did write one article to that effect, that if everybody wore a highly efficient mask with a valve in it, you'd be a lot better off than people wearing cloth masks and uh,
Interesting.
and
Yeah,
so
this great research you guys are doing. I when the CDC came out and this is before I mean, we had we were doing all the research and all of that. We were putting all this stuff together. We hadn't, the first piece of machinery hadn't even hit our factory yet. But I remember when the CDC came out and said, don't wear surgical masks, don't wear N95, wear cloth masks. And I know why they did it, because there was a shortage.
right.
But I was like, man, someone's going to get in trouble for this. Someone is going to get in trouble for this, because this is not, I mean, I had seen I'd read these studies about how like a BFE of a 16 layer cloth mask, they took 16 bandanas and they put it together, and it has a BFE of 60, right?
Yeah,
And I'm like putting these masks, our masks, we're doing our like testing and everything, and we're getting 99. And if you look at like the size of the coronavirus, which is sometimes smaller than 0.1 microns, fortunately when it's on the water droplets, it's about 0.5, which is a lot easier filtration, and N95 is going to catch it in that case. But you really need like a BFE 99 mask if you're going to really catch the coronavirus. And I'm sitting here thinking, this BFE 60, like this is terrible. And the worst part about it is there are people out there who put these masks on, and they're like, I'm gonna go grocery shopping and I'm fine. Or I'm
yeah,
gonna go hang with my friends, I'm fine. I've got a mask, I'm fine. And I'm like, you're not fine. It's double, it's worse, not just from, I mean, this data is amazing because this shows that it actually is a supercharger, but it's also worse because you feel like it's like you feel like you're wearing a shield, but you're not.
right. And I think this is great. This the work you're doing on the electrostatic charging sounds like you're really uh, doing a lot of advanced uh, engineering here, which is quite impressive.
Well, it's not me.
Well, it sounds like the company is anyway. So, in it, and of course, but getting to the numbers that we're talking about here, if everybody, well, and I guess that's another question. What do you tell your users relative to how many, what the life is, and should you try to clean these masks, et cetera?
Well, I mean, we put on the packaging, we have to by law. So the way the FDA works is with their license, with their the surgical mask is a type 2 medical device. And if you're going to register a type 2 medical device, it cannot be different than a type 2 medical device that's from before. So basically, I can go and look at the Kimberly-Clark masks, or any of the major or 3M surgical masks, any of these surgical masks that exist, and I can say my mask is basically the same as that mask. And then what I'm doing is I'm basically riding on their coattails of having got that approval from the FDA. And they say, okay, this is a standard thing that has been made before. You're going to make that standard thing, and that way we can approve it in 6 months. If we have a new device that's statistically different, that's a type 2 medical device, now that has to go through a completely different process. And that process can take 2 or 3 years, right? So we have to kind of be the same as what's been done before, in a way, if that makes sense. We can't deviate too much, although we are working on some of the stuff that, including we're partnering with this science startup, they raised like $5 million for this fabric that we're trying to use in our masks that has a breathability, that has 3x the breathability, BFE 99. It's one layer. You don't need to, because it also stops. Meltblown doesn't stop the moisture, which is why you need the spunbond on either side, but it's just one layer. And it's a different system. It's not a blowing system. It's a casting system. But we're looking at getting that going with them, and we've got some prototypes we're putting together. It's very small scale right now. To get that approved as a type 2 medical device is going to take a year at minimum. So we really have to consider what we're bringing to market with that, if that makes sense. So with all that said, in the longest way possible, the masks that have been made before are made to be disposable, single-use disposables. We have to put that on our packaging. Now, we know that they did a study in 2006, thrilling research paper. It's about 106 pages, so if you're bored, you should check it out, about the reusability of N95 and surgical masks. And what they found is the meltblown fabric can hold its static electricity charge for about 24 hours of use. So that means that if you want to wear this for 8 hours a day, and then you put it through like a UV sterilizer, or put it in your car, whatever, and hang it on your mirror for a day. If you get it sterilized, then you could wear it for up to a 24-hour period. But you really can't wear it for longer than 24 hours.
Because of the electrostatic charging is just temporary.
Yeah, it wears out. Basically, that a dumb way of, in my dumb brain of thinking of it, it's like, just think of these molecules actually getting trapped by the static electricity, and once that static electricity only has so much charge, and then it just runs out.
Right.
So, is there any
way that the mask could be recharged?
The thing is it's so cheap, it's not really worthwhile doing. It makes sense. I mean, right now our costs are much higher because we have a lot of startup costs, but I mean, my goal is to get these things down to, under 15 cents a piece, maybe cheaper.
Wow. Yeah. So so that really, that changes the whole equation there that we've been thinking, because we've been writing extensively about H2O2 systems and UV and what Patel's doing and all these others in terms of sterilizing the mass. But you'd written here as, and I didn't get the context of it on your website, something about 1.6 billion mask annual production capacity. What was that in regard to? Was that U.S. needs or?
No, that is once we ramp up to our total capacity, which will take probably about 3 or 4 months. Then that is the capacity of this factory. Now we've already gotten demand that, because you mentioned here, that the demand in the U.S. could be 5 billion. I think it's actually higher than that. We've gotten inbound requests for more than 5 billion, and these are from hospitals and governments, and and a lot of these are longer term orders, like 2, 3, 4 years, and including retailers, So I think the numbers probably for surgical masks, probably closer to, just for what we're seeing alone, and we're surely not seeing the whole market, probably 10 or 20 billion. Now, I have no, you know,
Yeah.
imagination that we're going to hold 100% of the market or anything like that. There's a lot of players out there. But our sort of like first, when we were building the modeling around this with our investors and everything, was we wanted to be able to get to over 1 billion. And the production we ended up going with was, it came out to 1.6 billion. That's running basically 20 hours a day.
Right. And yeah, you have a whole new dimension when you're talking about cheap, I wouldn't say cheap, I'll say inexpensive, but highly efficient masks that can be disposed of and run a maximum, let's say, of 24 hours. So then the 250 million Americans who at least would need to be wearing these, instead of 20 masks per year, they're probably talking in the terms of 200 masks per year. So you're probably talking 50 billion masks per year at a minimum under those kind of conditions. So that
Well,
that would.
and it's not just the U.S. that has woken up to this realization that this is a need. It's we've gotten so much inbound from Mexico and Brazil and a lot in Latin America, but also other parts of the world that do not have this capacity, that do not have this any sort of local production that they have access to. And so I think like it's a worldwide problem.
Right, and we've been addressing that too. We figure that at least 3 billion people around the world are going to need masks every day. So you're talking instead of 50 billion, you're talking 500 billion or a trillion, a mask that will be needed a year. And I think all this evidence about A, it's airborne, and B, an efficient mask is actually an aerosol generator, all leads you to that conclusion. And the more efficient the mask, the better. If you can get better than if you can get N99 equivalent or whatever, so much the better. But reducing the virus to 12% is a lot better than only by 20%. But you can still justify even more of it if you can save more lives per year. So it'll be interesting to follow. Oh yeah, and on that fabric, is that a nanofiber, or is that, you said casting? So it's a membrane. Is that a membrane product that you're that the other fabric?
Yeah, it's not a nanofiber product.
It would be a membrane, yeah. Yeah, and we are covering people like WL Gore and some of the other membrane companies, trying to understand what they're doing in this space as well.
Of course, there's a lot of extra approval on that. The nanofiber stuff has it's basically a secondary chemical that's added to it in most cases, though it's all different. And the FDA doesn't like that. There's only a handful of products, mask products, that the FDA has approved for nanofiber. So it's just, it's like, again, like if it's something that they know, they've been, and I gotta give a shout out to the FDA, because like they're charged with keeping all these people safe. They have limited staff, and here they are, like really moving folks through the process to try to get the stuff out there that's needed. But man, when you're talking about a new technology, they really have to take the time to evaluate that. And that's the difference between an American mask and a mask that you're going to get from another country, is because we do have those levels of protection.
Well, I think what you're saying is pretty powerful here. And, one caveat that's raised by, regulators is there isn't the capability. But basically what you're saying is you're going to have a 1.6 billion mask annual capacity in your planning here. So that is going to go a long way toward addressing the kind of needs that we're talking about here.
And honestly, like doubling that, tripling that, even quadrupling that is fairly trivial at this point. we basically need 60 to 90 days heads up to do that. So if the need was there, we could make that happen. We sort of figured out the model now. I think a lot of companies that exist, like 3M and like Prestige Ameritech, Kimberly-Clark, the folks that are making stuff in the United States, their machines are handmade. They take 6 months, a year to put these machines together. I heard that 3M was, standing up these new machines, and they were just cranking them out as fast as they could from their partner. I think they like started setting them up in their partner's factory that makes the mask for them, so that they could start cranking these masks out. But the thing is, like, what we have, it's just off the shelf, like robotics, off the shelf. I mean, it's like off the shelf robotics from Taiwan, Japan. The mask folding pieces are from China, because they make the best mask folders in the world. And it's literally, it takes 10 days for them to produce another mask folding machine.
Wow.
And then everything else is like proprietary, like it's just off the shelf. And we put it together, and like our PLC programming, which we use the Mitsubishi controller, and the sonic welders that we use are from the United States. And like when we put all of those things together, like it does become a proprietary machine, but it doesn't take, all the parts are basically off the shelf. So we're talking, probably 22 days from like saying, hey, we need to get another assembly line up, to it actually being live and producing masks. And again, like there's a ramp up, like it takes about 5% a week to get that thing going, but it is just, all of these other machines that exist have been designed 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Our machine was designed in 2020 using technology that's just faster. And so we're not playing a fair game, to be honest. Like if we're talking about competition, and it's cheaper too. Like, the Prestige Ameritech machines, I've heard, he's been quoted as saying that they cost $1 million each. Ours don't cost $1 million. So it's a lot easier and a lot cheaper for us to get to scale. So that 1.6 billion, that's just what we have planned for. We could go bigger if it was needed.
Yeah, I think that's a very impressive estimate that you've got there, and I think it's a pretty powerful combination. If in fact you're looking and saying essentially that wearing efficient masks is the best and possibly only way to really vanquish COVID, and there is, according to Armbrust, the capacity to do so very quickly, to ramp up to do it. So there really isn't any reason that we can't be getting back to near normal in a matter of months rather than years. So and at the cost that you're talking about per day per mask, it's nominal compared to the costs that the economy's experiencing right now.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I've thought, I listen to, all of these, economic shows every day, and podcasts, and I'm just thinking about what Congress is passing. They're thinking about this new bill that they're going to pass. I'm like, why not just send everybody 30 surgical masks?
Right.
Right.
It'd
be a lot cheaper, or 60, I guess. I think you need about 2 months. That would be a heck of a lot cheaper than what they're proposing doing.
Oh yeah, I mean, we have a lot of, in fact, on our website there, to have a lot of estimates that showing that it costs close to $1 million just to have a patient, going through the whole process and then through a ventilator. So
that's crazy. I had
yeah,
no idea.
Yeah, we have it process by what it costs for this, what it costs for that. By the time it gets all added up, you're talking $1 million, for a typical stay there. So these are big numbers. So the cost, obviously, comparatively, is minor. Well, Lloyd, this has been very interesting. I think that we want to have to continue to talk all this over and follow your technology and progress here, and I'm sure our listeners will want to learn more as well. So we'll send you a copy of the interview, and interface with you in the future.
Great, that's awesome. And yeah, and if anybody wants to see kind of daily what's going on in our factory, like you can follow me on Twitter. I'm just at L Armbrust. It's ARMBRUST, and I'm daily, like probably 5 or 6, videos and pictures. Like to me, like the scale of like how quickly manufacturing moves has just been mind blowing to see it first. And I can't help but like I was pulling out my phone and just amazed at how the things that logistically work in the United States are just mind blowing. I was able to get 2 containers put out in the back of my factory because we were running out of storage space in like 12 hours notice. I put money, and in 12 hours I had 2 40-foot HQ shipping containers sitting out there ready for me to load stuff in, like one trip, so almost brand new. And it was like $4,000 or $5,000 each. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, how does this exist that I can just at a drop of a hat get all of these things? Like it's so. I think the United States is in a really great place to where we can rebuild a lot of this infrastructure. But I think some of the stuff, like the strategic stuff, we got caught really unprepared.
Yeah, and it takes unconventional thinking, and I think you're displaying that you've got it and you're acting upon it. So I think you're to be commended on that score.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
Look forward to working with you, Lloyd, and we'll send you a copy of the recording here.
All right, sounds good. Thanks,
okay,
Bob.
bye now.
Thanks, guys.